Hello. I wanted to have a very candid conversation today about a few things. So today I've been sitting with myself a lot. I've been giving a lot of thought to a lot. I think I've mentioned this before, where I'm definitely someone who enjoys sitting with myself. I enjoy sitting with the hard stuff, the feelings. It's one of my special superpowers. I've learned to really let things sit, let things marinate. And a lot of what came up recently has to do with change and loss. I made this whole journal thing that I wrote earlier where I have a Notion, and I use Notion for everything from journaling to job applications, even financial tracking and financial auditing. I love Notion. It's such a beautiful space, and I made a Notion that feels really special. So I made a new Notion board that is a space for me to go to sit with loss. And when I say loss, there's all sorts of loss. So when I say that, it sort of touches on everything. So you find that you don't really have to go through a major loss in life to experience loss. I think everyone has an experience with loss, whether it be losing a stuffed animal, losing a house plant that you forgot to water a few times, or even I think my earliest memory with loss is being a child, and I had this tin can of baby teeth that I brought for show and tell for I think first grade or something, and I lost the tin can of baby teeth, and I was devastated. I lost it the day before summer, so it was the last day of school, and I was so sad, and I felt such a loss. And then also watching the movie Charlotte's Web, and I have this memory of being a child and watching the movie and being so deeply distraught when Charlotte died, the spider, because I connected so much with the character Charlotte, and I stayed up crying all night because Charlotte died in the movie, and it was really sad for me, and I felt that loss very deeply. So yeah, loss can be anything. It can even be the loss of childhood, the loss of someone you used to be, the loss of someone who someone else used to be, the loss of our old selves, the loss of an experience, the loss of expectations, the loss of outcomes. It could get really abstract and also very physical or tangible. And I like talking about this sort of stuff because I think it's important to. And I think a lot of this stuff is things that people sort of sit with themselves, but isn't commonly talked about with other people. So yeah, I think it's important to talk about this stuff, even though it's kind of deep and kind of sometimes pretty existential, because it sort of connects everyone, I think. And yeah, so I made this space on my Notion board as a memorial or a little cemetery or a space for me to experience loss in whatever form or shape that may be. And it could also be permanent loss, so the permanent loss of a loved one, or temporary loss, so just a temporary loss of something that is going to come back in the future, but in the moment the feeling of loss feels very real, so that feeling deserves to be seen, acknowledged, and felt. It also sort of reminds me how my grandma has this ritual where I would say maybe once a week or every few days, she lights a candle for, I think, her deceased partner, my grandpa. And she lights a candle for him every week. And it's her ritual. She always does it. Maybe there's weeks that she doesn't really need to do it, but she still does it and she keeps that habit. So I was thinking about that, and I felt something like loss isn't something that I think you kind of just feel it once and it goes away. I think it's one of those things where it's when you feel sad, it's something that deserves to be felt periodically, just as a reminder that it's there and you don't really try to push it away. I notice when you don't deal with something that's pretty heavy, like the big stuff, it has a way of like showing up in like the things you do. So I think one of the things I've talked about before was how I had this thought once where I was like, is great art only born from pain and sadness? Like, is there art that's not underlying with that? And then I ended up finding that there is art, but it's just hard. And I've seen a bunch of stuff that also kind of talks about that and asks the same question. So similar to like that feeling of loss after sitting with it for a while today, because it's just something that I noticed kept coming up. And the way I noticed it was I'm really good at noticing patterns that I do. So if I notice myself sort of gravitating towards a particular action or anything, and it keeps coming up, I tend to be like, why do I keep doing that? Like recently, I noticed myself kind of going through my gallery a lot. So recently, like this week, I've been a lot more nostalgic than I typically am. And by nature, I'm pretty nostalgic. I like to kind of like reminisce and stuff. But this week was more frequent than most. And I was like wondering why that was, where I just kept finding myself looking back at like old photos, old memories, just kind of reminiscing on like lost people that I don't talk to anymore, people like friendships that I don't really have anymore, people in my life who have changed in different ways, grown up, like all that, like the whole shebang. And I sat with it and sat with it. And then today I sat with it and I sat with it. And I was like, I think there's this feeling of loss that is asking to be felt. And when I really thought about it, I realized that loss is a feeling that I don't think I ever really allowed myself to fully feel. And I've been through a similar situation with anger, where I'm someone who strives to really feel every emotion that comes up for me fully. And the ones I feel the most comfortable with is joy and sadness. I'm very comfortable with sadness, and I'm very comfortable with joy. I'm very comfortable with like a lot of the other emotions. I know anxiety really, really well, but last year I noticed that anger was an emotion that I never really allowed myself to feel. And last year I really sat with that, and I was like, why is that? Why don't I know how to process anger? Why haven't I allowed myself to fully process anger? And that a lot of things sort of came up with that, that I had to really unpack and like take a look at. And then with anger, I realized that a lot of anger kind of has underlying hurt with it. So anger isn't something that you should kind of be scared of. It's kind of something that wants to be seen. And usually I think a lot of things with anger is just kind of buried sadness. So the more you unpack anger, the more you find that there's like a lot of pain associated with it that hasn't been looked at and sort of been tucked under the rug. And it's funny now because recently I've felt myself reaching a place where I now feel comfortable unpacking loss, where I think for a long time I shied away from it because it felt like it was something that was too hard for me to take a look at. So I coped with it in like a array of different ways. So I coped with it through distractions, through productivity, through self-growth, through being the best version of myself I could possibly be, through just like anything else, even laughter. One of my biggest coping mechanisms is laughter and like jokes. So optimism sometimes is a coping mechanism. So I found myself for a really long time, I would cope with loss through a bunch of different ways because I didn't feel ready to really deal with that feeling and really process and feel it fully. Though today I found that I think I am ready to really fully feel that feeling. And today was the first time where I fully allowed myself to feel the feeling of loss. And it almost felt like I was attending a funeral. of everything I've ever lost. Big stuff, abstract things, down to like very specific things, like I mentioned before. So any point in my life where I felt some sense of loss, I made a note of it and I looked at it and I fully allowed myself to spend today and really just mourn everything I felt like I lost, that I really didn't allow space for because I just couldn't handle it. And at first, it felt really challenging, where it was really tough. But I found that the more I sat with it and really allowed myself to feel that feeling of loss, eventually I felt like this sense of peace, where I was like, wow, I've never felt this feeling before. Like, I never felt the feeling of really feeling loss. And I think this would have been the feeling that I would have imagined that I would have felt the day my dad passed away, that I attended his funeral, that I didn't feel. Because when I went to his funeral, I didn't really feel anything. I didn't really know what to feel. I didn't know how to process it. And I think going back to like emotional intelligence and why that's so important to me, why I'm so passionate about emotional intelligence, especially with children, I think a big dream I had that I think might still be prevalent, that for a long time I really carried with me, was I really wanted to make a difference in the education system, because I feel like when you're a child and you watch a movie like Charlotte's Web and you have this feeling of loss, or when you lose your favorite stuffed animal and you feel this feeling of loss, you feel it and you don't know what to do with it. It almost feels sort of invalid because you're like, I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know what to do about it. So when I lost my stuffed animal, its name was Spiky. It was a cheetah, and it was my favorite stuffed animal ever. And when I lost it, I remember feeling this deep sadness. And the way I dealt with it was I kept trying to find replacements for it. So I would keep looking for stuffed animals that looked like a cheetah, and I would name it Spiky Jr., Mikey. I would just find ways to replace that feeling of having Spiky. And that's how I dealt with it. I didn't really know what loss was or how to deal with it. So when you grow up not really understanding, these are very like complicated, convoluted, deep emotions. Yeah, you don't really know how to process it. So you grow up not really understanding it. So now that I know that as an adult, I'm like taking a look at it. And I think I'm healing a lot of that part of myself. I think a lot of today was just me like sitting with feelings I've never really sat with before. And healing it and just giving it a space to breathe. That's really what it felt like. Like I felt like today was a day that I really gave space for this feeling of loss to really breathe, feel seen, and just exist without any sort of expectation, without me trying to like cover it up, without me doing anything about it, just to exist. And it felt really, really good and really, really peaceful. And then it made me also think how I want things that I do now to exist separately from it. Because after looking at it, I found that a lot of things that I do creatively have this underlying feeling of loss that was not fully dealt with, and it would kind of seep through my art. It would seep through my writing. It would seep through other things. So I find when you deal with the really heavy things, it doesn't like come out in different ways. And you're able to kind of like relieve it and like kind of just do things the way you want to do things. So as like another example, when my dad passed away, when that happened, the next day I went to work. And I remember I went to my boss at the time when I worked at Whole Foods, and I was like, can I get the day off in 2 days? And he was like, why? And I was like, well, my dad passed away yesterday and I have to go to his funeral. And he looked at me and he was like, why are you at work? Why are you here? Stop, go home. And I was like, I literally can't be home. Like I have to be here. Like I have to be working. This is like how I need to deal with this. And I find that that's a coping mechanism. So after that, I find that a lot of the ways I deal with the hard emotions is through productivity, through ambition, through self-growth stuff, which is all like very beautiful. Like I do think productivity, doing things that benefit me, growing, looking for ways to better myself as a human, all very beautiful attributes. But I do want to find a way to separate that from it being fueled by loss or it being fueled by like sadness, you know? Because I think ambition, growth, all of those positive traits can exist without it. And I think now, after I sat with it all day, I'm trying to figure out what that looks like for me. So what does it look like creating outside of that sort of stuff? Like after I feel the heavy stuff, what does creating look like for me? Like how can I do that and not have it be attached to that sort of heavy stuff? And I have a really great example that I sort of sat with. So a movie that I saw recently is Maria. Amazing movie. Such a great movie. Maria is a movie starring Angelina Jolie. Phenomenal actress. She's one of my favorite actresses. And she made a movie called Maria. And the movie is about an opera singer. And there was a quote or a scene where Angelina in the movie was in a diner talking to a woman that played her sister. And within their conversation, she was reflecting on her life as an opera singer. And she was saying, well, her and her sister in the movie had been through all this trauma, all these terrible experiences when they were younger. And they were both reflecting upon it and like talking about it. And then the sister was telling Angelina how she had moved on from it, how she was really working on like building a life beyond it and just kind of like transcending those experiences to like have a better life. And then Angelina, I forget the name of the opera singer she was starring as, but she was telling her sister how she really struggled with moving on from the past, moving on from those terrible experiences. And she felt like she almost couldn't, like she almost didn't want to, because she felt like if she moved on from those terrible experiences, she wouldn't be able to sing. She wouldn't be able to be an artist, and she would lose her voice. And she was scared that if she lost those feelings, if she lost her attachment to those terrible experiences, that she would no longer be able to create. And that was her fear. So she was willing to put herself through those terrible emotions and not really process it because she felt like she needed it in order to be a great, amazing, world-famous opera singer. And that's crazy. And then it also reminded me of another situation where that came up, where it was like a long time ago, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, where a guy that I was like very briefly dating, and on his Hinge profile, the first thing I remember seeing was, I actually found it because I was like looking for it, and this is what he has, and he actually still has this on his Hinge profile, where he wrote that, where is it? I wrote the quote down because I remember when I first saw it, I was like, this is so jarring, because I would have, So he wrote that one thing he would not shut up about is how he believes that creativity needs pain and disturbance in order to produce authentic beauty. And when I saw that, I was like, that just feels very flawed. That feels wrong. Like, I don't know why, and I don't have any experience to prove it, but I know in my bones that, like, that just feels terribly wrong. Like, I don't think beauty and creativity need pain and disturbance in order to actualize. Like, I think both can exist separately. And there's also an episode in one of the best shows ever, Midnight Gospel, where a character in the show brings that up, where the character in the show says, she was like talking to because the whole show is really great. It's pretty much like a visual podcast. It's a little like vulgar, and it could get kind of like brash at times, but it's really worth it because like a lot of the episodes have such meaningful and beautiful messages that are just so impactful. And the character in one of the episodes of the podcast, the visual podcast, she was saying how like she was scared of moving on from her own like pain and like bad experiences, because she was scared that if she did, she wouldn't be able to write great writing. She was scared that her writing wouldn't be good if she didn't have that sadness fueling it, you know? So, but then she found that once she like healed that sadness, that her writing was the best it's ever been. And she's written the best stuff from separating herself from that sadness. So it's funny how all of these memories sort of came up for me all at once, like just like connecting. But it's something that's always just, I've like noticed that like, yeah. And it's just really cool, because I think this is maybe something that maybe like a lot of artists and creative people have thought about, that you don't really hear people talking about, that can they create really great art if it not be associated by those like negative, unprocessed feelings. And yeah, I think it can very much exist. I think the hard part is like maybe figuring out how, or like where to draw inspiration from. And yeah, it made me think about that today. Like, if I don't draw inspiration, creativity, drive, ambition from the things that have hurt me in the past, then where do I find that drive and ambition, that energy, that spark? And yeah, I think I'm sort of still sitting on that. I don't really know where. I think you want to think like the things that do bring you joy. It's kind of like, who are you? It's kind of like, I thought about this, like asking yourself, like, who am I outside of my trauma? Who am I if you separate me from all the things that have ever hurt me? Like, what are you? And I've thought about this before too, like kind of existing in the world separate from the burdens you carry, if that makes sense. Like, if you healed in a perfect world everything that you needed to heal, and you made peace with every bad experience, you know, like, then how would you exist in the world? Like, what would that look like? Like, what would your personality look like? Or is it so deeply ingrained that you can't really separate it? You know, like, I don't really know. It's kind of like when you interact with people, like if you're kind, if you're compassionate. Like, I know a lot of the reasons that I'm a very kind and empathetic and compassionate person is because I know what it feels like to not experience that. Like, I know what it feels like to have someone not treat me in a kind way, not treat me in a compassionate way. So I strive to not do that to other people. I know what it's like to not feel involved in a conversation. So I make it a point to always include people in conversations. So when you think about, like, how would I exist in the world if my driving, if what drove me to do those things weren't bad experiences, you know? Or is it like, can you separate it? Like, it's kind of like empathy. Like, where does empathy come from? Like, is empathy inherently just like this this standalone goodness that you just have? Or is empathy born from not having empathy? Does that make sense? Like, is empathy born, do people become empathetic because they know what it feels like to not have it? Or is empathy just become out of just being empathetic? I don't really know the answer to that question, and it's something that I'm also thinking about. Like, is it possible to be kind without any sort of reason as to why you are that way? I don't know. And I'm not to say, like, it's a bad thing. Like, it's not bad. Like, there's no bad, there's no good. It's just a question that I do wonder, like, can things exist on their own, or do not so great experiences, or are great qualities born from not great experiences? Can a great person become a great person without ungreat experiences, or great people just born good, great people. You know, I mean, that's like open for interpretation. But like, you know what I mean? I don't really know. And it's something that I think about. And it's one of the reasons why I love sitting with myself. I love thinking about this sort of stuff. I think it's very, very fun thought candy, and you learn so much about yourself thinking about this sort of stuff. And yeah, I just feel really happy because I think today was genuinely the first day I've ever allowed myself at 29 years old to feel the feeling of loss. And it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It wasn't earth-shattering. It wasn't devastating. I felt so much peace. Like, I felt like I opened up something that has been calling to be opened for a long time. And I feel a lot lighter. And I feel like I can now do things and not feel like I'm like coping or like I'm trying to push it away. I'm not trying to like shove it under the rug, you know what I mean? And I wanted to talk about it because I feel like it's really important to talk about it, because I think through talking about it, you find that, you know, maybe like other people could resonate with it. And then I also wrote something a while ago in a journal entry, how I feel like everyone's story is worth telling. I think a long time ago I had a conversation with one of my friends where I think one of my friends was saying how she wanted to write a book or something along those lines. I forget exactly what the conversation was, but I know the conversation centered around her saying that she wanted to write about something, but she didn't want to. It was hard for her to do it because she felt like so many people had already written about it. So she was like, well, there's no point in me doing it because there's already so many other people who have done it. And I think I told her, because this was something that I had also thought about, because I think for a long time I've also sort of juggled or played around with the idea of writing a book or writing something, because I feel like I'm always learning so much. I feel like I'm such a student of life. I don't master anything. I think I'm always learning. I'm always a student. Even when I'm 90 years old, I'll always be a student. And yeah, I've learned so much. And I think it would be really cool to write and just like leave behind something that people could maybe find value in. But anyways, I've thought about that before. And I was telling her how I feel like every story is worth telling. So what I've noticed, like, through my own personal experiences, I noticed that, like, I love self-help books. Like, I love reading about self-help stuff. And I noticed that when I'm at Barnes & Noble and I'm looking for a book in particular, I'm someone who's just, like, I judge a book by its cover. Like, literally, like, I'll look at a book, and if I don't like the way the book's cover looks, if I don't like the way the font looks, if the font is too small, like if the book is visually not pleasing to me, if I don't like the writing style of the author, the book could be great. It could be the best book in the world, but I won't pick it up. I won't read it because I don't resonate with the visuals. I don't resonate with the writing style. I don't resonate with whatever it is, you know? So I noticed that there can be 10 books all saying the same thing from 10 different authors, and there will be one that I like the best, and that's the one that I pick up, and that's the one that I read, and that's the one that I gain value from. So me thinking about that, I learned that every perspective is worth writing. So you can write about something that's been written about a million times, but maybe your version of it will resonate with the 10% of the people, or maybe the 1% of the people out there who would have never picked up a book about it because they didn't resonate with it until you wrote about it and they resonated with the way that you said it, with the way that you wrote it, with the way that you presented it. And that's really important. And I wrote something in a journal where I was like, every story is worth telling. And I think history would be deeply flawed if it did not take into consideration every perspective, every story, every narrative. And yeah, I had this thought that, yeah, everybody's perspective is worth sharing and worth having out there because it could touch a different person. And I think the point of literature, The point of art, the point of sharing knowledge is to touch as many people as possible. And I don't think you can do that if only a handful of people are sharing their stories. I think you need 1,000,000 stories to reach 1,000,000 people, because everyone resonates with something differently based on everyone's own experience. So, yeah, I forget I forget why I went on about that, but yeah, today I've been thinking a lot about loss in a really great way, and I think a big point I had to make for myself is that the loss, it doesn't have to be permanent. This kind of goes back to like my own thing of like learning to like exist within the gray, learning that things doesn't have to be black or white, yes or no, this or that. Things could be in the gray, things could be blurred, things could be maybes. You know what I mean? So I think, yeah, with loss, this is acknowledging to myself and to anyone who needs to hear it, that loss doesn't have to be permanent. You could lose something now and maybe it'll come back later, but that doesn't take away from that feeling of loss that you're experiencing right now. And I think that's really important, because I think a lot of the times people could feel like a feeling is not valid because it doesn't feel that serious, because it's not, like, I know it's very easy to lose a stuffed animal, and then your friend lost like actually a person, like physically, like from life. And then it's easy to be like, well, the loss that I feel doesn't matter because I'm comparing it to this other loss that is obviously objectively a lot bigger. And I think with a lot of things in life, that's a dangerous it's a slippery slope, because the feeling of loss is the same. Like, it doesn't matter if one person's loss is objectively bigger than another person's loss. That feeling feels the same to both people, And this is a little heavier, but it's also reminding me of a lot of studies that show that domestic violence, like the physical kind, your body your body understands it the same way it understands emotional abuse. So one person could be physically abused and another person could be emotionally abused with like words, harsh comments, and both of those people, their brains, their pain receptors, their bodies processes it the exact same way. So it can't tell the difference. The only difference is that the person experiencing the emotional abuse feels like theirs is a little less valid than the physical person, because I guess of a stigma or whatnot. But yeah, everyone experiences loss differently, and every loss feeling is valid, no matter how big, no matter how small. It all matters, even if it's temporary, even if you lose someone forever, even if you lose someone only for a short period of time. The loss feeling is real right now, and I think it's important to make it feel seen and to mourn it, even if it's not forever. Yeah, so I know in my own life, I've definitely lost friends, not like physically from the plane of existence, but like in life, like people outgrow each other. People go through life stuff where for a few months, you're not talking to a certain friend or you're not talking to a certain person. And then maybe like a couple weeks later, the friend comes back or the person comes back, and it's fine. But I think it's important to acknowledge feelings in the moment, and which is like that feeling of lostness. So yeah, that was just kind of like a preface that I made for myself that I thought was also important to bring up. Yeah. I just wanted to acknowledge the feeling of lostness and the importance of feeling it, and how it's okay that if you're not ready to feel the hard stuff in the moment. Because I think there's also a lot of negative self-talk that's really easy to fall into when you don't feel ready to feel something. Even me, someone who's very accustomed to feeling very deep, difficult emotions, there are still moments where there's some emotions that I just can't unpack. in the moment, and it takes me a while to feel ready to process it. And I think it's also important to remind everyone as a community openly. I don't know how, but it's important for people to remember that if you don't feel ready to feel something, that's totally fine. You could not feel ready to feel something for years, and then maybe 10 years later, you're ready. And I think that's totally valid, that's totally fair, because everyone processes their own emotions differently. And it's all valid. Everyone has their own timeline, everyone has their own thing, you know? So, yeah, I just wanted to share this little tidbit because I think it's really important to give space to it, and I know it's a little heavy, and it's not like a mix. But I think it's really important. And I think something that's really important to me is talking about the big stuff because it helps me, and hopefully it could help someone else out there in the interwebs. But yeah, on a brighter note, I do have a fun mix that I'm working on, like a summer and a spring mix that I'm really excited about. So I'm like slowly piecing it together. It's supposed to be like a super energetic, like good vibes summer spring mix that I'm really hyped about. So that's gonna happen pretty soon. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I think for the time being right now, I think I'm gonna continue giving space to this new feeling of lostness that I've now have found the courage to feel fully. And then I'm gonna slowly work on unpacking ways in which to find my ambition, my motivation, and my drive from more lighter or more me sources. So sources outside of that. Because I think it's possible. I don't know how exactly. Maybe I'll have to read up on it. Maybe I'll have to experience it. Maybe I'll have to try things out. But I think a big goal of mine right now is to like find the feeling of aliveness from motivating factors outside of like the heavier trauma past stuff. So I'll keep y'all updated. Stay chill, stay wavy, stay cool. It's okay if you feel a little crazy. All right, talk to y'all later.